Hey everyone, Spicy Toast Gaming here, and today we're doing our follow-up video for the best early relic combinations. In that previous video, we went over what the first common relic should be, what your first rare relic should be, and then what your first rare relic and common relic combination should be. In this video, we're going to be going over some powerful combinations for your first two rare relics, and then your first two rare relics plus a common relic. We will be giving you multiple different combinations for each one of those, and we will be going through every single champion. As you can see here, I do have my account fully maxed out. We have every single champion, all of them start up, and all of them leveled to max. If you are enjoying all this Path of Champions content, definitely like and subscribe. Trying to push forward 10k subscribers by the end of the year. We have a long way to go, but with your help, I think we can get there. Alright, let's get into the video. First up, we have Aatrox. The first two rare relics you might want to go together is the Crown Guard Inheritance and the Troll King's Crown. So when I level up Rally and Troll King's Crown, allies have Overwhelm. Aatrox has a very powerful level up. It normally can be achieved within the first two rounds of having Aatrox on the board. When he levels up, he gets Overwhelm and gets a lot of extra stats, but then all of his units that have those Darken equipment all transform into their Darkened forms, really giving you a massive power spike. So rallying off of that and then giving all your units Overwhelm just really helps you seal off the game right then and there. Very powerful and fun win condition. Once you hit 25, you're going to get a common relic slot. For this, you likely want to throw on a Lost Chapter just to speed up your game plan, letting you use any of your extra spells or equipment with that spell mana you're getting, just to try to close out the game as fast as possible. For the next combination I would shout out would be the Grand General's Counterplan, Berserker's Buckle. This for your level 19 2 rare relic combo. So Berserker's Buckle, when I survive damage, grant me 2/2, and then the counterplan. With the counterplan, you're going to be creating a Deathbringer Sweep, which then if you play it, gives you a Slash and then a Descent. Each one of these lets Aatrox and another unit strike each other. This lets you achieve so many things all at once. For one, every one of those strikes that he's surviving, he's scaling up with that 2/2. Then also, he's healing your Nexus every time you get that strike. And then from your star powers, he's also reducing down the cost in your hand. So getting all of those strikes off will really help you scale up. It also helps you level up even faster. This will be a fairly mana hungry build, but when you hit 25, I would recommend Spell Shield. Since you're focusing on your Aatrox himself scaling, and you're spending most of your mana towards that, you really don't want him taken off the board by something simple like a Vengeance or Obliterate. And some of those tougher later game bosses have a lot of kill and obliterate spells. Normally in those situations, a Banshee's Veil is much better than something like the Lost Chapter. So this is another combination that I would recommend. So for the first Annie build we want to shout out, it is the Archangel Staff plus Luden's Tempest. Both of these need Annie to be on the board. What you're doing is you're playing Annie the very first round. Every round after that, she's refilling your spell mana and then also buffing up all the damage of your spells and skills by 1. This is essentially the exact same thing that your star powers are doing, so it's just like an extra level of star power, which works out quite nice. Once you hit 25 and you can get that common slot, throw on a Banshee's Veil to just protect your Annie. Once you have that on, the only main thing you need to worry about is enemy units with Challenger, so watch out for those. But it's a very fun, simple build, just letting your Annie sit on the board and then improving everything you're wanting to be doing with playing spells and making those spells and skills hit harder. For the second build we want to shout out, use Gale Force and then either Dreadway Chase Gun or Guardian's Orb. So take your pick based on what playstyle you want to go down. So you're playing Annie every single round. Every single round that you play her, she's either making 2 warning shots in hand. It says deal 1, but remember, from the star powers, this is going to be dealing more like 3 damage every time, and you're making 2 of these every round, really chunking down the enemy Nexus. Or Guardian's Orb, when I'm summoned, grant epic items to 3 random cards in your deck. So choose which playstyle you'd like to go down, and then for the common relic when you hit 25, I would throw on a Lost Chapter. That way, every single round you're summoning Annie, she's refilling your spell mana, and then proccing one of the other 2 effects. Really fun and different playstyle for her. Definitely check it out if you can. Next up, we have Ashe, and she is a interesting one to me. So for me, there was only one real solid playstyle of you want to be using all 3 of these relics, but I'll let you choose which ones you want to use for your first 2 rares. So Archangel Staff, refilling your spell mana, the Grand General's Counterplan, creating a fleeting copy of me in hand, which is going to be your Flash Freeze. Also remember, for Ashe, the Flash Freeze has the Hextech Fabricator rank 2 on it, so it's going to be giving your strongest unit or granting them a random blue item on the card every time you use it. So this is both buffing up your deck, but also giving giving you great control, and then giving all your units overwhelm. This is something Ashe and her deck really needs to make games not draw on too long. So I would play around with these three and find what one works best for you. But for level 19, we can use your 2 rare relics, use any combination of these three. Each one has its own ups and downs, and it also potentially depends on what you are facing up against. If you're going up against someone like Aurelion Sol, then you probably really want the Troll King's Crown, that overwhelm, so you can end games as fast as possible. But if you're going to a match that's going to be a little bit longer, you might want to go with the Archangel Staff and Grand General's Counterplan. But I'll leave that choice up to you for which one of these commons you want to use. For the common relic to pair with it, I would actually again go with the Banshee's Veil. Ashe is your win condition. You need her to be on the board because she needs to be on the board and leveled up so that enemies with 0 power can't block. This is your main way that you can win games when you have enough to push through and just overwhelm the enemy. So giving her that protection with the spell shield I think is very important. So that's generally what I would go with for the first common relic that you have. Next up we have Bard, and it's somewhat similar to Ashe. So for Bard, I think you always want to be using Corrupted Star Fragment as your 1 rare relic. Now the other 2 is up to you, but I would always recommend using the Corrupted Star Fragment. It just works out so well for Bard. One, putting all those extra stats on Bard, all those keywords, it's great. It also helps you level up, which can be very important because when you level up, you can then put more chimes on your deck, further increasing your scaling. Now the reason I have it in the middle is because if you're going with the Green Glade Shadeleaf, you need this to be first, so it activates first, gives the supported ally that elusive, and then Bard can consume that unit with the Star Fragment, giving himself or granting himself that elusive. But I feel like Shadeleaf isn't that needed, as you do have a lot of other elusives in your deck that you can normally consume. So normally myself, I would go for the Corrupted Star Fragment plus the Berserker's Buckle. But if you want that guaranteed elusive every time, you can go with the Shadeleaf. Again, similar to some of the other champions, you might want to consider Banshee's Veil. Now, similar to the elusive, most of your units that you're playing actually have Spell Shield already on them, so you can get it pretty reliably with Bard. Again, if you want that guaranteed one, you might want to put it on there, but you could also go with the Chameleon's Necklace, as not only does having extra copies of Bard in your deck help you, it also increases the amount of chimes that are placed in your deck every single round. If you are going to go down this route though, I definitely recommend trying to consume a unit with Spell Shield as soon as possible, just to give you that survivability since you're putting all of your stats onto Bard himself. Really fun playstyle though, definitely check it out if you have the opportunity. Up next we have Darius, and similar to Bard, you normally want to be running the Curator's Gatebreaker on Darius so that he's able to end the game when you play him, but you might want to go 2 different routes with it. So the Scourge of Stash, Plunder, I cost 2 less, so you're trying to get Darius on the board a little bit early. His strike is going to feel a little bit weaker, but then normally that will level him up. He'll get the extra stats going to 10 power, and then using him to finish off the game from there. Or you can go with the Bounty Hunter's Renown, so Darius can get a lot of extra stats. It will be a little bit later till you can play him, but then when you do play him, he will be finishing off the Nexus in most situations. Now, the common relic I would recommend using for Darius is the Star Child Staff. Quite often with Darius, you need to be taking hits as your units are too important to block since they have very weak health pools. So normally you need to be taking hits so you can attack with your full power and getting that rally off from your star power. So the Star Child Staff, healing you at the start of every game, can really help you out, and this is normally my go-to common relic for Darius. Up next we have Diana, and the best build, if possible, as in if you have it, is Gale Force plus the Troll King's Crown. Gale Force, good for a lot of different things on Diana. For one, she's going to have double attack if you have her at 3 stars, so being able to attack twice with the Scout, and then having each one of those attacks go off twice again because of the double attack, lets you push a massive amount of damage. Then the Troll King's Crown is just making sure that you're not going to get blocked out. If you get blocked with that double attack and you don't have Overwhelm, then the attack will fizzle and you're really not doing any damage to the Nexus. So having that Overwhelm is very, very important. With this build, especially if you can get some stat relics or stat items on her, lets you end the game soon as possible, giving you a crazy amount of damage. Quite often you're going to be ending games in the very first round. Now, once you hit level 25, a lot of things actually open up for you. One thing you could do is replace the Troll King's Crown with the Troll King's Crusher so that only Diana has that overwhelm, but normally that's enough. If you're doing that, then I would normally put a stat relic in your second slot. So the best stat relic you have available, normally that's Bounty Hunter's Renown if you're playing a normal adventure. If you're doing the monthly challenges, then you probably want to get the hammer. We see that up here, the Warhammer. This will be better for the monthly adventures. So once you hit 25, you might want to make that change. For a second setup you might want to go with is Archangel Staff plus the Grand General's Counterplan. So Diana, you can play her on the board in the first round. She's refilling your spell mana. And then with the counterplan, you're creating a Pale Cascade every round. So good combat trick, giving you draw, but this also has the rank 2 Hextech Fabricator on it. So you're able to really buff up your units with a lot of items. Now, every time you're playing this, you're also putting a Diana in your deck. So later rounds, you're just going to be playing this, instantly drawing another one. You can just keep playing it over and over again, giving you a massive amount of stats and items. Can be pretty fun if you don't have that Gale Force. For common relics with this build, you probably want to go for the Banshee's Veil just because you're wanting Diana to sit on your board the entire game, so that extra little layer of protection can be quite nice. Next up, we have Ekko. For your first 2 relics, I would do the Chemtech Duplicator and then the Grand General's Counterplan. Chemtech Duplicator, once you get to that 6 mana gem, all your spells are doubled. This is as long as Ekko's on the board. This gives you absolutely massive power spikes as Ekko has some crazy finishing spells. The Grand General's Counterplan, around start, create a fleeting copy of me in hand. That is going to give you your called shot. So draw 1, create a parallel convergence in your deck. That parallel convergence, start a free attack with an exact ephemeral copy of each ally. Very, very powerful spell. Really helps you end games. And normally you're going to be playing this when the duplicator is now active. So this is going to go off twice, massively overwhelming the opponent and really finishing off the game. Now for the common relic, again, I do like Banshee's Veil here. Ekko is a very weak champion in regards to his health, so having some amount to protect him really will help you out. Now if you want a bit more of an aggressive approach, you can go for double strike relics. So when I'm summoned, I strike the enemy nexus, or when I'm summoned, I strike the weakest enemy. Every time Ekko strikes, he's creating that fleeting time trick, which gives you that predict, then draw 1. Now, since he's creating it, it's only going to be a 1 cost from his star powers. And there are different ways that even though we're not recalling Ekko, you can play other Ekkos, such as with your parallel convergence. If you have Ekko on the board when you play this, you're going to summon another one. He'll immediately get those strikes off. So that can be a pretty fun build, but especially when you pair it with the Lost Chapter. So every time you're summoning an additional Ekko, he is then refilling your spell mana. And if you didn't want to do the double strike relics, you could definitely replace one of these with either Archangel Staff, Chemtech Duplicator, Grand General's Counterplan. Any of those would also work here. But the double strike relic, especially when you have Lost Chapter, isn't bad as they're both going to give you those predicts. You're wanting to predict as much as possible, and your level up is you've predicted 4 times. So being able to get 2 of those off immediately will just half of your level up condition is done right there. It is a bit of a different playstyle, but can be quite fun and rewarding. But sometimes you have to get a little lucky with powers in game. Up next we have Elise, and the go-to combination is the Gale Force plus the Troll King's Crown. Scout works out very well because when you attack, you're summoning an attacking Spiderling. Since you can attack twice, you're then summoning 2 Spiderlings. But then also, the first time you attack with Elise, you're then granting all of your Spiderlings your star powers if you have her at 3 stars, or you grant them all your keywords, that is. So granting all of your units Scout as well as Overwhelm, while summoning 2 units every single round or every time you attack. This can be very, very nice. Also, in-game, you can often get the Quick Strike Blade, which is an item that when you play Elise, she starts a free attack. If you pair that with Scout, it actually rallies, so that you can then play Elise on your off turns where you normally don't have the attack token to generate the attack token. That can be very, very strong. Now, once you hit 25, there's a couple different things you can do. You can either switch out the Troll King's Crown for the Troll King's Crusher, and then either throw on another common relic, so like Quick Attack. So then the first time you're attacking with Elise, you're giving or granting all of your Spiderlings everywhere, so even ones that you generate, Scout, Quick Attack, and Overwhelm. That's a massive power spike. If you're going down this route, then Elise isn't really your main powerhouse. You just want to play her at the very start of the game to give your Spiderlings a massive amount of power. You'll obviously keep playing and attacking with her, but if she dies, it doesn't really matter, as she's already accomplished her goal of granting all of your Spiderlings these crazy powerful keywords. But if you want to be a little bit more focused on Elise, then you can just go with the Overwhelm, get rid of the Storm Razor, and give yourself a nice big stat relic like the Bounty Hunter's Renown or the Warhammer, so that Elise is still important, will still be doing good amount of damage herself, while also granting her spiderlings some very powerful keywords for ending the game. If you want to make Elise more of a aggro champion similar to like Jax or Diana, this can be a good way to do that. If you don't have Gale Force though, or you just don't like the playstyle, then I would go with the Corrupted Star Fragment plus the Succubus brand. So Corrupted Star Fragment, kill my supported ally, grant me its keywords and stats. Great way for buffing up your Elise and then getting more keywords to give to your spiderlings. Succubus brand 1/1, so a little bit of a stat increase, and then when I kill a unit, which you're doing from the Star Fragment, summon a random husk. So you're generating more units, and those units will have random keywords, which in turn can be given to Elise and the spiderlings again. These two pair really well together. There is also the Voidborn Carapace of when any unit dies, grant me its keywords. You could trade this out for the Succubus brand to try to get more keywords directly onto Elise to give to your spiderlings. I generally prefer the Succubus brand for your second rare relic, but Carapace is there if you also want to try it out. For your common relic to pair with it, I would normally go for Overwhelm just to try to end the game as fast as possible, but you could also go for Quick Attack. You just want to choose which one of these you want to be granting to your spiderlings. You can generate both of these in-game with different powers or items as well, but both of these are very common or very strong keywords to give to your spiderlings, so I would just choose one of those for your common relic. Now this build is still a lot of fun, very strong. It is going to be a little bit slower than Gale Force, not by too much, but will be probably a round or two. But in this situation, your Elise is just going to be a monster getting tons of stats and keywords, and she will be the main focus, whereas with Gale Force, sometimes it's a little bit more focused on the spiderlings themselves. Still a lot of fun, definitely check it out if you have the opportunity. Up next, we have Evelynn, very similar to Ashe. These are the 3 best rare relics for Evelynn. You want all 3 of them. Which 3 is definitely going to be up to you. Now, I personally normally go with the Crown Guard Inheritance plus Tempest Blade, so every time Evelynn's leveling up, she's rallying and stunning all enemies. That is my go-to selection. But I know some people like the Deceiver's Crest, where when you level up, you create a copy of me in hand. It costs 0. That gives you the Last Caress, stopping all enemies, spells, and skills targeting Evelynn, and she strikes an enemy, giving you some removal as well as protection. I find that there's often rounds we just don't need the Deceiver's Crest, since their units could just be stunned anyways, and you can just freely attack with that rally. So my go-to for your first 2 rare relics would be Crown Guard Inheritance plus Tempest Blade, but if you want to switch one of those out for the Deceiver's Crest, that's definitely up to you. For the common relic I would go for, it is Banshee's Veil plus Inheritance and Tempest Blade. Evelynn is your win condition. You want her on the board leveling up every single round to scale up all your units and then trigger the other 2 super powerful relics. So protecting her with that Banshee's Veil is quite nice, and that would be my go-to selection. Up next, we have Garen. With Garen, I like to go very simple with the double strike relics. His level up is I've Struck Twice, with this relic combination of Gatebreaker and Stalker's Blade, which if you have 2 of either of these, you can swap out, so either 2 Stalker's Blade or 2 Gatebreakers if you would prefer. I only have 1 Gatebreaker, otherwise I'd use 2 here, but his level up is I've Struck Twice, so when you play him, he immediately levels up. That's obviously amazing. But then from your star powers, whenever one of your units strikes, they get either 1/1 or 2/2 as far as stats. So here, Garen is potentially getting 4/4 from stats since he's striking twice. A lot of fun, can often just end the game, but if not, you have Garen immediately leveled and scaled up to a kind of crazy amount. Normally then for a common relic, I would just do Overwhelm, just so he can attack and end the game right then. Now, while I greatly prefer the double strike method, if for some reason you either don't like the strike playstyle or you don't have those relics, you can always go with the Crown Guard Inheritance plus the Troll King's Crown, so that when Garen levels up, he rallies, and then when he levels up every round after that, he also rallies, so you can really try to end the game. Then with that Overwhelm, with all your big scary units, because Garen's one of those decks that his units can scale up to quite a crazy amount, you're just ending the game with all of these rallies and all this Overwhelm. Again, I prefer the double strike relics, and I would take that in pretty much every situation, but this can also be decent if you don't like that playstyle. For the common relic to pair with it, I would either go for Banshee's Veil or Lost Chapter. So you do have some fairly powerful spells with Garen, especially your single combat you're making every round. Throwing the Lost Chapter so you can immediately play that and get a strike off, get halfway towards your level up. That's not bad. Or you can go for Banshee's Veil just to protect Garen. Make sure all your units always have that overwhelm, and then Garen is going to keep giving you those rallies once he's leveled up. So wanting to protect him with the spell shield, not bad. Next up, we have Gnar. So for your first two relics, I would go with the Scourge's Stash plus the Dreadway Chase Gun. For Gnar, his stats can be pretty weak for the cost of 4 mana, but they're very good for a cost of 2 mana, so getting him cheated out earlier, quite nice. Your whole game plan is centered around hitting the Nexus, so normally you're able to do that to cheat him out with that Plunder. And then the Dreadway Chase Gun, playing him and summoning 2 warning shots. Like I just said, your whole game plan is wanting to hit the Nexus every round. So having 2 free ways to do that with the Chase Gun, really nice to pair together. Now for your common relic, a couple different ways you can go with it. So Rage Blade, actually not bad to help boost up your somewhat weaker stats. Or you can go with Lost Chapter. You have a lot of spells you want to be playing, so refilling your spell mana can be quite nice. Or you can always go with Spell Shield if you just want to protect your Gnar from enemy spells. Also a decent option. Another potentially powerful combo for you, Curator's Gatebreaker, Bounty Hunter's Renown, plus the Lost Chapter once you hit 25. So you play Gnar, he's able to hit the Nexus, getting your 1 hit you need to do for the round. Bounty Hunter's Renown to buff up his stats and also increase the damage of his strike. And then once you hit 25, that Lost Chapter to be able to refill your spell mana and play more of those spells for you. Up next we have Gwen, and I think this combination is by far the best. So Crown Guard Inheritance when I level up Rally, plus allies have Overwhelm. With Gwen, especially when you're higher level and have those 3 stars, you're normally going to be leveling up the very first time you attack, and often the way it will play out is you attack with Gwen, you rally, you then attack again, and you'll be finishing the game, especially if you have that Overwhelm, so all of your damage will actually be carrying through and hitting the Nexus. With the Hallowed mechanic, you're able to buff up your unit's attack to a crazy amount, but only for the round. Since you're able to attack twice in a round from the rally, you're able to buff up your attack twice. So with this combination, 9 times out of 10 or more, you're going to be fully healing, leveling up, and ending the game with your first attack with Gwen. Very powerful. I know there's a lot of other ways people like to kind of tweak this playstyle, like either putting on a Gale Force instead of Crown Guard Inheritance, or going for Luden's Tempest. In my opinion, this here is just by far better than any other combination. Now, if you want one of the other combinations just for fun, definitely play around with it, but I feel like this one is objectively just the best. Also, Crown Guard Inheritance, you're guaranteed to be able to get this from one of the personalized adventures. I believe it is Darius. I could be mistaken, so comment down below if it's a different one, but I believe from the Darius adventure you get the Crown Guard Inheritance, and so being able to have a guaranteed relic drop instead of something like Gale Force, which you can't even get anymore, is just another reason why I feel like Crown Guard Inheritance is the best for this combination. For your first common relic, I would really suggest Banshee's Veil. You don't need anything else, you just need Gwen to survive for her first attack, and you'll end the game. So getting extra spell mana from like Lost Chapter or anything else just really doesn't matter. You just need to protect Gwen, and this is the build I highly recommend you trying out. Another version of this build that I feel like is generally just worse, but I know some people really like it, is using Gale Force instead of Crown Guard Inheritance. This way your Gwen can attack twice. Again, each time you're attacking, you're able to buff up your attack power to a very high amount, and then the higher your attack power, the more damage her skill deals. And then the Luden's Tempest is doubling the damage of that. So you're really transitioning your focus into the skill itself instead of actually striking with your Gwen. And again, the Banshee's Veil to protect her. I would only really recommend this build if you've already tried the other build and you're just wanting to try something slightly different with your Gwen. This build does work fine, but to me at least it just feels like a worse version than the previous build. Up next, we have Illaoi, and it's almost the exact same situation as Gwen. It always cracks me up how they're right next to each other in the champion list. Illaoi and Gwen's playstyle are very similar, where you're scaling up in the first couple rounds, you then play your champion, they attack, and essentially end the game. So with Illaoi, normally your first attack, you deal enough damage that you level up. You can then use Crown Guard Inheritance to rally, and then with that rally, you can end the game. Now, there's a couple different options here for the second relic, though. As you can see, Illaoi herself already has Overwhelm, and then this Overwhelm is more for giving it to your Tentacle so it can push through and still deal that damage. But another option that I actually normally run with is the Shade Leaf. So this way what you do is you attack with Illaoi, you put the tentacle right next to her so she supports it, the tentacle then gets elusive, and it's achieving about the same thing as the Troll King's Crown. Now the Troll King's Crown does affect your entire board, not just the unit that's getting supported, but this can be nice if for some reason you're not able to finish out the game and have any extra attacks. That Shade Leaf you can use on other units as well, slowly granting your whole board elusive. In general though, the build that I would highly recommend you do for Illaoi is first your Crown Guard Inheritance and then one of these two relics. Again, normally you'll play Illaoi as soon as possible, you'll attack, level up, rally, and end the game. It's a very powerful and simple way to play, and honestly the playstyle feels almost identical to Gwen and her playstyle. Again, very similar to Gwen, what I would use for your one common relic would be Spell Shield. For Illaoi, you just need her to be protected so that she can finish the game for you when she attacks. That's the only thing that matters. So making sure that she doesn't get frostbitten or stunned, vengeanced, or obliterated, any of these things. That's why the Banshee's Veil is so important. So for your common relic, definitely grab that Spell Shield. For a second build that can be quite fun to run, you can put the Shade Leaf first and then the Corrupted Star Fragment. This way, Illaoi can consume the tentacle herself, getting all of those stats, and then attacking with her Overwhelm to try to end the game. You can pair it with Shade Leaf so you have Overwhelm, Elusive, and a massive amount of stats. Now, while I feel like the first build I touched on is better in most situations, the one good thing about this is that when you pair it with Banshee's Veil, you're then protecting all of those stats better. The tentacle, there's not really any reliable way to get it spell shielded, so it's very susceptible to getting stunned, frostbitten, or just taken off the board. So with this build, you're essentially able to save those stats on Illaoi herself and better protect them. Again, normally not as good as the first build we showcased, but it can work out quite well still, and it is an interesting change of pace if you're looking for something a little bit different. Next up, we have Jack. I like to go for the double strike relics again. Any combination of these will work out fine, because strike, create a coin in hand. So you're not only taking out enemy targets, you're also getting more coins you can use to trigger your star powers, buffing up all your units, damaging all the enemies, and potentially trying to level up shortly after playing him. I think it's a lot of fun. Granted, I really like the different champions that can utilize a strike playstyle. For the common relic, I would definitely go with Lost Chapter. This helps you out in several different ways. One, refilling your spell mana, yes, but it actually works like Ravenous Hydra as well, because your star powers, at least when you're at your third star power, when you refill your mana, you deal 1 damage to all enemy targets and then give your whole board 1 power. That triggers from the Lost Chapter, which can be a pretty dangerous combination and a lot of fun. Lost Chapter is definitely the best common relic you can put on Jack, in my opinion. Another fun combination you can go with is the Berserker's Buckle. When I survive damage, grant me 2/2. You're going to be generating those prize fights where an enemy and one of your units strike each other. And so being able to strike and scale off of those can be quite nice, as well as then generating more coins. Archangel Staff, round start, refill your spell mana. Again, this can trigger your star power, which is nice, but then also just having the mana to play a lot of your different spells can also be quite handy. For your common slot, you can again go with the Lost Chapter, or if you want, you can also go with the Warmogs, the regenerating, just so that Jack isn't sitting at too low of a health percentage. That one is up to you. Definitely play around and see which one you like more. Up next, we have Jax, and he's another bit of an interesting one. So you can again pair any two of these 3 together and your build will work out totally fine. So my default is Gale Force and the Troll King's Crown. You're essentially playing the exact same way you would Diana, except you don't have to worry about getting your Nightfall effect off. So you're able to attack twice with Jack. Make sure both of those, make sure both of those attacks have all of their damage going through with your Overwhelm, and you're normally able to end the game in the first 2 rounds. But some people like pairing the Gale Force with the Crown Guard Inheritance, so you can normally attack twice. On your second attack with the Scout, you'll then level up, rally, and be able to attack again. There is the issue of you potentially getting blocked out, and since you don't have Overwhelm, not being able to end the game. But if you want a crazy combo of being able to attack potentially 3 times in the very first round of a match, Gale Force and Crown Guard Inheritance can get played together. Now, if you're someone that doesn't have Gale Force, Crown Guard Inheritance plus Troll King's Crown also works out quite well. Normally in the later parts of adventures, you're going to be able to level up Jax with his very first attack once you've gotten a couple items and scaled him up a bit. So you'll be able to attack with him and his whole board, rally, and then attack again. And then with the Troll King's Crown, that overwhelm, you'll normally be ending the game. So even if you don't have Gale Force, you're not at much of a disadvantage. But again, for your first 2 rare relic slots, take any of these 3, throw them together, try them out, and you'll probably have a great time. Now for common relics, I would suggest using your Banshee's Veil. Jax can be very squishy, especially with that 2 health. Quite often you can just get killed with like a Mystic Shot or something like that. So having that extra protection can really help you out, especially from enemy spells. Normally you don't have to deal with enemy units as much as you can normally overpower them. But yeah, once you hit 25, use one of these 2, Banshee's Veil, and you'll be all set. Next up, we have Jhin. Now for your first relic combination, I would recommend using the Riptide Battery. Plunder, play Cannon Barrage a number of times equals to my cost. So Cannon Barrage, deal 2 to a unit. If it's dead and gone, deal 1 to the enemy nexus instead. This counts as a skill, and skill is the main thing that Jhin is entirely focused on. From his star powers, every time a unit plays a skill, they're granted 1/1. So this is going to scale Jhin up 4 times, giving you a massive amount of stats, normally triggering his passive effect of playing a Lotus Trap, as well as often leveling him up. Very good ability. It is a plunder effect, and you do have to work a little bit harder to make sure that plunder effect gets taken care of for Jhin, but it's definitely worth it. Now for the second relic to pair it with, you can either go with Crown Guard Inheritance or the Luden's Tempest. Luden's Tempest increasing the damage of the Riptide Battery, plus then all of your spells and skills, which is a lot. Luden's Tempest is definitely the easier way to go, and you'll still have great effectiveness. Crown Guard Inheritance, when I level up Rally, this one will take a bit more effort to pair with the Riptide Battery, but the effect will essentially mean you end the game when you play Jhin. You just need to make sure you don't already have the attack token, so you're not overriding it. You also need to make sure that when you play him, he's leveling up, and you need to make sure you have that plunder effect already achieved, so that he will get that Riptide Battery. It does take a little bit more effort, but after a couple games, you'll get the hang of it, and it's a very powerful combination. But if you don't want to bother with any of that, you can just go Battery plus Luden's Tempest, and still have pretty good results. Now, if you're going for the Crown Guard Inheritance route, then you can use the Everfrost when I'm summoned, stun the strongest enemy as your common relic. Jhin scales quite well with stuns, and that's just make sure there's one less blocker you have to worry about if they didn't die from the Riptide Battery. If you're going for the Luden's Tempest, then I would recommend going for Banshee's Veil, just to give you that little bit of extra protection since Jin's going to be on the board longer. Normally with Crown Guard, you're ending the game that round, and with Luden's Tempest, that might not always be the case. Now, if you don't like Riptide Battery or don't have it, you could swap it out for a Archangel's Staff. This will still give you pretty good usability. You won't have as crazy of that amount of a wombo combo with just destroying the entire enemy board, but this still will work out quite well for you, and you'll have a bit more of a controlling playstyle. In general, not really as good as Riptide Battery in my opinion, but it works fine as an alternative. For Jhin, I will also actually add in a third option of just going with Crown Guard Inheritance and Tempest Blade. So Jhin, when he levels up, being able to rally and stun everyone. His attack, when he rallies, deals 4 to all stunned enemies and the enemy nexus. So triggering his level up and then being able to immediately rally and have everyone stunned will either end the game or just absolutely decimate the enemy board. So here's a third playstyle option if you want to go with this. It will take you a little bit longer to level up, since you don't have the Riptide Battery giving you all of those triggers, but this can pair quite well together. For Jinx now, for your first 2 rare relics, I would go for the Loose Cannon's Payload plus the Curator's Gatebreaker. This will immediately level up Jinx, as well as doing a massive chunk to the enemy board and the enemy nexus. Quite often just flat out winning you the game, especially since you're playing her a little bit later for her full cost and not cheating her down with the Scourge's Stash. For the common relic to pair with this, I would go with the Lost Chapter. So you have the mana to play your double Death Rockets you're going to be summoning, as well as a Pow Pow if you need it. This is a very powerful combination, and it would be my go-to for those levels 19 and 25 until you get to level 30. For another alternative, this one will be slightly worse if you do this immediately level 19, but we have the Scourge's Stash and the Loose Cannon's Payload. This will be much better after you hit level 20, where you have a guaranteed champion draw at level 20. This way you can try to play Jinx earlier in the game, and while the Loose Cannon's Payload itself normally won't be enough to flat out end the game, it will put you at a very strong advantage, dealing large amounts of damage to the Nexus and their board, with then a whole bunch of pow-pows to continually clear out any units they play. And then again, once you hit 25, throwing on that Lost Chapter, making sure you have the mana to play your pow-pows, as well as your double Death Rockets. Also, you could throw on a Riptide Battery if you don't have a Curator's Gatebreaker to achieve pretty much the same effect of triggering your Plunder, playing Jinx, and then having her clear the enemy board. Jinx is quite versatile though, so there's a lot of different relic combinations you can go with her. Next up, we have Kai'Sa. I would highly recommend using this combination. So Blade Rack plus Troll King's Crown. This way, when you're playing her, you're triggering 3 different keywords with the Quick Attack, Challenger, and Overwhelm. So you're most likely going to be triggering your Evolution, leveling up Kai'Sa, and then giving all of your Evolve units 2/2. Really strong. Also, this pairs quite well with your second star power, which all of your units that have 3 or more keywords have 2/2. By giving all of your allies 2 keywords, most cards are going to have at least 1 keyword to be able to trigger that extra stat increase. Would highly recommend using this. Really, the only time I wouldn't recommend using this is just if you don't have these available. It works out so well for Kai'Sa, really does feel like the best early combination you can do for your 2 rare relics. If you don't have one of these, you can then throw on a Luden's Tempest, as this will increase the damage of your attack. So when you are leveled up, you have a attack that you deal 1 for each positive keyword to enemies and the enemy nexus. Luden's Tempest is going to double that damage, giving you a very powerful attack effect. So if you don't have one of these 2, you can replace it with Luden's Tempest. It will be worse, but it will still be decently strong. Highly recommend though using one of these 2 if possible. For your common relic, there's 2 different routes I would go down. So either Banshee's Veil to protect Kai'Sa, but you have multiple ways to give Kai'Sa Banshee's Veil later, so it's not as necessary. I would actually normally go down the route of one of the relics that has a more rare keyword, not necessarily good keyword, but just another keyword. So keywords that you normally aren't going to find in your deck, so either Tough or Challenger or Regenerating. I don't believe you have those keywords in your deck by default, whereas the Quick Attack, Overwhelm, Spell Shield, all of those are on different units in your deck. So just trying to throw on another keyword to make sure you're both leveled up, and then also increasing the damage of your attack, since your attack scales off of how many keywords Kai'Sa has. That would be my approach for what you want to look for in your common relics. Next up, we have Kayn, and I would go for double Stalker's Blade. And this is for a couple different reasons. So for one, he has the level up condition of I've struck twice. When I level up, recall me. This then triggers your choice to either go down the Spectral Assassin, or what is it called? The Shadow Assassin, or Rost. By the way, I normally go for Rost. I think it's better in most situations, but still you can go whichever route you think best. But what happens is you play him, he gets 2 strikes, he gets recalled, he goes to this version of Kayn, so you can play him again for 0 cost, and then he transforms into either Rost or the Shadow Assassin. So if you don't have Stalker's Blade, you can throw on a Gatebreaker. For Kayn, I think Stalker's Blade is actually best, because with Kayn you want to be killing units. With his star powers, when him or any of his units kill a unit, they are granted 2/2 and fully heal. So being able to play Kayn, have him strike 2 units, kill them both, hopefully, that'll give him a lot of extra stats. When he gets recalled, he actually keeps those stats, so you're not losing them. And then when you're playing him again for 0 cost, that same round in most situations, he's going to again strike 2 units. So you can potentially get up to 4 kills with this playstyle, or at least weaken units enough that the second time you play him, he's killing them. Having 2 strike relics, especially 2 Stalker's Blade, is really the way to go in my opinion. And actually I'd often end up going with Soul Spear for the +1 in the Fearsome, just because he has such a pathetic attack for his cost, that being able to boost it up just by 1 to potentially get another kill and start your scaling can really be quite helpful. But throwing on Quick Attack to have that Quick Attack Challenger combo also isn't a bad call. This is normally the build I would recommend, well, except with that Soul Spear, just to really help you kill units and start your scaling. Kayn really is a feast or famine deck, so if you can't get kills with him, your deck's going to fall apart. but if you can start your scaling, then you are unstoppable. Now, if you don't want to go down the strike route, you could also go with the Berserker's Buckle plus the Grand General's counter plan. So Berserker's Buckle, when I survive damage, grant me 2/2. Kayn does have a good amount of health, so using him as a blocker is a very good idea. This way you can do your scaling even if you can't kill some units in the start, and will help you scale up to the point where you can start killing enemy units. The counter plan, it is an expensive card, your Shadow Step, but it is very powerful. So you give Kayn quick attack, and he starts a free attack challenging an enemy. So you're taking down an enemy target, killing them, starting your scaling, and he's even given quick attack for that round. It's a very powerful card. And then with the Rage Blade at 25, attack grant me 1/1. Again, another way for you to scale up your Kayn without him actually getting kills. All of this is just to help you get kills so you can start scaling up even more. Really helps your Kayn become a monster without actually having to go the route of the Strike Relics. Now I still think the Strike Relics are better, but here's another fun playstyle you can do if you either don't like the Strike Relic playstyle or you just don't have the Strike Relics. Next up we have Kindred, and for your first 2 rare relics, I would go with the Gatebreaker plus Guardian Angel. So Gatebreaker, when I'm summoned, I strike the enemy Nexus. Kindred is all about dealing straight Nexus damage, so this feeds into that playstyle already. And then Guardian Angel, start adventures with 1+ revive, and then last breath. If this is the first time you've been slaying this game, revive me with 1 health. You have many ways to kill your own Kindred, proccing the Guardian Angel and triggering the Gatebreaker again. Very powerful combo, and what I would go to as my first rare relic combo. I would also pair this with Lost Chapter so that every time you're summoning Kindred, she's refilling your spell mana, and you'll be summoning them many times with the Guardian Angel. Now note that if you're going down this route, you will be focusing on a more defensive playstyle where you're just trying to do damage straight to the enemy Nexus. You're not really going to be leveling up or scaling up your Kindred with this playstyle. If you are wanting to go for the scaling Kindred route, now go with the Corrupted Star Fragment, and then either the Bounty Hunter's Renown or the Berserker's Buckle. It's up to you. So the Berserker's Buck will help you scale up more throughout a match, whereas the Bounty Hunter's Renown will just give you a bunch of stats at the start of the match to potentially help your scaling. And then once you hit 25, I'd go for Banshee's Veil for a spell shield just to protect your Kindred since you're trying to scale her up so much. Corrupted Star Fragment does work quite nice as it counts as you slaying a unit, which then puts a mark on the enemy. So it does have some special synergy there. From my experience, this build doesn't work out quite as well as the other one, but I know a lot of people like to have very strong scaling builds where they just have an absolutely monster of a unit, and this definitely fulfills that playstyle. Next up we have Leblanc, and now there's a ton of different ways to build Leblanc, but what I would recommend, if possible, is go for Gale Force and Gatebreaker for your first combination. With Leblanc, what you're generally trying to do is level her up as soon as possible, and then attack as many times as possible, because every time you attack, if Leblanc is leveled, you're going to be summoning a ephemeral version of her. With this build, you play Leblanc, she strikes the Nexus for 5 damage, there's 1/3 of her level up condition met. Then you can attack twice, each time you're striking for, again, 5. So you're able to level her up on the first turn you're playing since you're able to achieve that 15 damage. And then for any rounds following that, you are playing Leblanc. Again, she's hitting the Nexus, and then you're able to attack twice. Each time you attack, you're again summoning more Leblancs. So it just pairs out quite nicely together. And for the common relic, I would go for the Lost Chapter. Since you're summoning Leblanc so many times, potentially multiple times in a single round, every time she's summoned, she's refilling your spell mana, even if it's just a ephemeral version of her. Lost Chapter pairs really well with that. If you don't have Gale Force, you could just go for 2 strike relics. So you play Leblanc, she strikes twice, each time for 5 power. Then you attack or potentially block, able to hit for another 5 power, so you level her up in the first match, and then every time you or your units attack, they're summoning another Leblanc that's going to be striking. In addition, when she levels up, she's creating a mirror image, so summoning an exact ephemeral copy of an ally. You can use this on LeBlanc, summon one, they'll proc the Lost Chapter, refilling your spell mana again, and then they will also do these 2 strikes, hitting for, at minimum, 10 damage, but you can very easily boost that damage up, so the LeBlanc you're summoning is dealing more than 15 damage, which if they deal 15 or more damage, they're summoning another mirror image. You're playing the mirror image for 2 mana, you're summoning LeBlanc that's refilling 3 mana, striking, creating another mirror image, and it just becomes an infinite cycle, and that can be a lot of fun to deal with. So in my opinion, these are some of the best builds you can do for LeBlanc in these level ranges. But again, there's tons of different ways to play her, so definitely experiment. Next up, we have Elise. For your first relic combination, I would go with Chemtech Duplicator plus Archangel Staff. Elise, the earliest you can play him is 5 mana, so the very next round, Chemtech Duplicator will activate. Archangel Staff will give you that spell mana, and then you should be able to close out the game fairly shortly after that with all your spells getting duplicated. For your common relic, I would put on Troll King's Crown, as that gives Elise a massive power spike. When he's leveled and he attacks, it essentially lets him hit the Nexus twice, giving you absolutely massive amounts of damage. For another relic combination, you could use Hymn of Valor and Troll King's Crown, and then once you get 25, that Lost Chapter. So you're making a Hymn of Valor, so fully heal an ally, then double its power and health, and that's being set to 3 costs when you play Elise. You're giving him that Overwhelm, so again, he can essentially hit the Nexus twice when he attacks if he's leveled up, and then Lost Chapter so that he's refilling your spell mana, so 3, so you can immediately play that redoubled Valor and try to attack and end the game the very round you play him. If you're going down this route, you generally want to try to have Elise leveled by the time you play him if possible, as that will really boost your damage. Up next we have Leona, and for the first relic combination, I would go with the Grand General's Counterplan plus Archangel Staff. So for the Grand General's Counterplan, you're making this Morning Light. It's a 3 cost, give allies 1/1 this round and activate an ally's Daybreak effect. Very strong right there. And then this costs 3. Archangel Staff, giving you that 3 spell mana, so you know you're going to be able to play this every round. Great way to buff up your whole board, as well as potentially stunning multiple enemies. Because with Leona, when she levels up, when you activate another Daybreak effect, she stuns the strongest enemy and gets barrier. So being able to have this effect where you're activating another Daybreak, when you do that, Leona will also Daybreak, so you can get a lot of Daybreak effects going off, which scales up your entire board from your star powers. If you're going down that route, Leona's going to be on the board most of the game, or you're wanting her to stay on the board once you have the mana to play her. And so you have the Banshee's Veil, the Spell Shield, just to make sure that she's not taken off the board, as your other 2 relics need her to be on the board to take effect. For a bit more of an aggressive approach, you could also go for Berserker's Buckle. When I survive damage, grant me 2/2, and the Troll King's Crown. With Leona, you're having your whole board be buffed up, so they have a lot of very strong scaling units. Making sure they all have Overwhelm to try to end the game works out very well. Leona herself having that challenger, you can make sure enemies are blocking you, and so you're able to consistently scale up your Berserker's Buckle. For your common relic, you can still go for Banshee's Veil, but you could also go for the Rage Blade, so attack, grant me 1/1, again, scaling up your Leona even more. If you prefer scaling playstyles, and like having that big, strong, scary unit, this is definitely a fun way to go about that. Next up, we have Lux. So for your first 2 rare relics, I would go for Chemtech Duplicator and Archangel Staff. Chemtech Duplicator pairs amazingly well with Lux, giving you a bunch of rallies and final sparks from all of these spells you are duplicating. And then when you're playing those spells as well, they also get duplicated, so it works very well for Lux. She's one of the best champions that utilizes the Chemtech Duplicator. And then you have the Archangel Staff just to make sure you have the mana to play all of your spells. Once you hit 25, getting that Banshee's Veil just to protect Lux also is a nice little benefit. If you prefer having a passive champion that you don't even need to play, but they're still giving you benefits, and Lux pairs very well with that sort of play style, as you can normally win the same round that you could play her. You can go for the Cardmaster's Gambit. So 1/1, which we don't really care about, but when you win an encounter without taking any Nexus damage, earn 1 reroll. Lux is pretty good about doing that. There will be a couple matches where sure you take Nexus damage, but I find the majority you can win without taking damage, so you're going to earn several rerolls from this. Heart of Gold, you earn 50% additional gold during adventures, just making sure you always have enough gold to get whatever you want from the shops, and you don't ever need to worry about running out of gold. And then the Z-Drive Prototype, start adventures with 2+ rerolls. Another good passive relic. None of these need Lux to ever be on the board for them to take effect, which is why they work so well if you just don't want to worry about playing your champion and you just want to focus on the deck itself. Next up, we have Master Yi. My go-to relic combination is the Crown Guard Inheritance plus the Grand General's Counterplan. Grand General's Counterplan, very good for Master Yi. You get your Wuju style, give an ally 2 power this round. then you're also generating a meditate, essentially letting you play 2 spells every single round, which is very important for Master Yi, as his deck is based on the flow mechanic, which is playing 2 spells in the previous round. Also, the Wuju style has a champion's horn on it, so when you play this spell, you're going to draw a champion. Now, most of the time, that's going to be another Master Yi, which will again immediately transform into another Wuju style, so you can essentially just keep playing this forever, which is why it pairs so well with Crown Guard Inheritance, because you can buff Master Yi up to exactly the right amount so that when you attack or block, you can level him up, then by rallying and then ending the game. Now, once you hit level 25, you can either add on a Banshee's Veil for some extra protection, or maybe go for the Lost Chapter just to give you some extra spell mana for that first round you play Master Yi, which can really help you get your flow off in that same round. Normally you're spending all your mana on Master Yi himself, so you don't have any extra mana to play spells. Lost Chapter can really help mitigate that weakness. Now, if you don't want to go for the Crown Guard Inheritance, you can switch it out for a Archangel Staff, so you always have enough spell mana to play your fleeting spells that you're creating every single round. I would still stick with the Grand General's Counterplan, as I think it's probably the best relic you can get on Master Yi. And again, you can either go for the Banshee's Veil or the Lost Chapter when you have that 3rd common relic slot. Next up, we have Misfortune, and I would suggest using Blade Rack and the Troll King's Crown for your first combination. For Misfortune, you want to go very wide, having a full board of 6 units most of the time, or close to it. So being able to give all of your units Overwhelm as well as Challenger can be very powerful. Now, if you don't want to use both of these, you can pick whichever one you like best. I normally prefer Overwhelm, but I know some people prefer the Challenger. And then you can swap the other one out for a Luden's Tempest, as that works out pretty well on Misfortune. Then I would normally pair it with a Banshee's Veil, since Misfortune is very easy to take off the board. And you normally want her on there for the entire game if you can. But if you want to focus more on a spell-slinging Misfortune build, you could throw on a Grand General's Counterplan and again use the Luden's Tempest and the Banshee's Veil. The reason Luden's Tempest works so well for Misfortune is all of her spells and skills normally just deal 1 damage, and they deal that multiple times. So an ability might normally do like 3 damage, but it's 1 individual instance each time. So Luden's Tempest, instead of increasing that damage to 4, it's actually doubling the damage up to like 6 damage or more. So if you want to be more of a spell-slinging Misfortune, this is a great way in order to achieve that fantasy and can be quite effective. Up next, we have Nami, and I would recommend using the Chemtech Duplicator plus the Grand General's Counterplan. By this point, you already know what Chemtech Duplicator does, as well as the counterplan. For Nami, it makes the ebb, which when you cast then makes the flow, and then that makes a ebb and flow. The ebb does 2 damage to a random enemy or the enemy nexus. The flow lets you choose who you heal, either one of your units or your nexus. And then the ebb and flow deals random damage, and you get to choose who gets healed. With Nami's star powers, you want to be able to cast 4 spells in a single round, because that last spell will get doubled up. The counterplan is great for letting you do that. And then the Chemtech Duplicator, once you hit that 6 mana, doubling all of your spells, you will very easily end the game after that. And this just gives you a massive amount of removal as well as sustain. Banshee's Veil, you just want Nami to sit on the board and be protected, and the Banshee's Veil is great for that. If you don't have Chemtech Duplicator, or you are realizing that you're normally ending the game before you're getting to that 6 cost or 6 mana anyways, you can go for the Troll King's Crown. Allies have Overwhelm. I would still stick with the Grand General's Counterplan though. This will help you end games a lot faster, as Nami's constantly buffing up her whole board, so normally they have a massive amount of power. And so being able to use that power with Overwhelm to finish off the game. Again, I would still use Banshee's Veil, as you really just need Nami to be protected, as she is your win condition. Next up, we have Nasus, and I would go for Curator's Gatebreaker plus the Crown Guard Inheritance. So you can play Nasus, he'll strike the enemy nexus, then leveling up if he has 10 or more power. Then you'll rally and try to end the game. For the common relic, I would go for the Lost Chapter, so that you can try to play a Siphoning Strike the same round you play Nasus, just to further scale him up as well as any other champions. Or you could go for Hymn of Valor and still Gatebreaker. You want him to level up as soon as you play him, partially because once he levels up, he also gets Spell Shield, so he has that extra protection. And then he's also reducing down all of the enemy's power. Hymn of Valor, able to double his stats, and then the Troll King's Crusher, so you can actually use all those stats to one-shot the enemy Nexus. You will likely need to play him, have him level up, and then use the Hymn of Valor the following round, as you probably won't have the mana to do both. But having the Overwhelm from the Crusher is just going to matter too much. Otherwise, Nasus just gets blocked out and normally doesn't actually deal the damage to the Nexus that he needs to. Next up, we have Ornn, and this is the one-shot the Nexus build. So Gatebreaker plus Bounty Hunter's Renown. You're just going to play Ornn. He's going to be buffed up from the Bounty Hunter's Renown plus whatever equipment he's copying. He's then going to strike the Nexus and one-shot it, hopefully. We're throwing on the Soul Spear just for 1 extra power, just so we can hit it even harder. This will work out quite well in the vast majority of matches. Really, the only opponents that will be able to survive this will really be like Aurelion Soul, or a unit if they have the Unyielding Determination legendary power, which again you can only see in the Aurelion Soul adventure. For most other adventures, this should work perfectly well just to immediately one-shot the Nexus. But if you actually want to play with Ornn, then you can use the Gale Force plus Corrupted Star Fragment combo, where every time Ornn's attacking, he should be leveled up by the time you play him. That's pretty easy to do in most games. When he's leveled up and attacks, he summons that attacking ram. He's then immediately consuming it. Then with Gale Force, you can attack again, make another ram with your stats, again, consume it. This lets Ornn do an absolutely massive amount of damage. That ram that he is consuming also has Overwhelm, so he's going to get overwhelmed, so you don't have to worry about that damage not actually hitting the Nexus. You will just have to make sure you have the attack token when you play Ornn, and then adding on that spell shield when you hit 25, just to make sure the enemy can't stun him, recall him, frostbite him, kill him, any of that. He is your final win condition, so you want to make sure the enemy can't do anything to stop you. Up next, we have Pyke, and I again would use the double strike relics. And this is for a very important reason of you really want Pyke to level up as soon as possible, because once he levels up, now when I kill an enemy, I strike the weakest enemy. And that's why we have the Gatebreaker hitting first. You could use double strike or double Stalker's Relic, but it's somewhat useless since once he's leveled up, he's already going to be killing one unit and moving on to the next. So that's why we have it in this order. So he strikes the Nexus first, hopefully levels up, and then strikes an enemy unit. Then we also add on the Soul Spear just to give him a little bit of extra power. Remember, even though he's starting off at 1 health or 1 power, that will be getting scaled up throughout the match from your lurk mechanic. And so just playing him and letting him get 2 strikes off will often achieve a large amount of your level up condition. This is my go-to combination, and I find it works out quite well. Now, if you're finding your Pyke is just too weak out the gate, you could throw on a stat relic, and I would still suggest pairing it with the Stalker's Blade at least, as it's a great way to start your combination every time you're playing him, or start your board wipe every time you play him. Now, from the most recent event, there was a Stalker's Blade in the event pass, so I feel like most people probably have at least one of these. So I'd highly recommend using at least one in your build, and either then pairing it with another Strike Relic, or the Bounty Hunter's Renown, or another stat relic such as the Warhammer. And the Soul Spear actually works surprisingly well, just giving you that little bit of extra damage, because really leveling up your Pyke is your number 1 priority. You want to get that done as soon as possible. Up next, we have Samira, and the by far best relic combination is the Crown Guard Inheritance plus the Dreadway Chase Gun. So Samira, you're wanting to play 6 cards in order to level up, and this resets when you get the attack token. So having the Dreadway Chase Gun to have 2 free cards that gets you close to leveling up really helps you out. Crown Guard Inheritance being able to level up. You can normally achieve this on your second round if you're lucky to start with the attack token. So normally with this combination, you're able to end the game in that second round from that level up and that rally. Then the Lost Chapter on top of it, once you hit 25, really just helps make sure you're able to consistently level up in the first 2 rounds. This gives you a massive amount of power and aggression, making you one of the best early game champions in the game. If you have these relics, I definitely recommend trying this out. Now, if you wanted to go for a more monster Samira playstyle, you could go for the Corrupted Star Fragment, Berserker's Buckle, and Banshee's Veil. And then you play Samira at the very start of the game and immediately start consuming your units and just scaling up to pretty ridiculous levels, with the Banshee's Veil just to give you that extra layer of protection. Now, I think the first build we showed is definitely much more consistent and better than this one, but this one would still be a fun change of place if you want something just a little bit different. For Sett, I would recommend using the Chemtech Duplicator plus the Grand General's Counter Plan. Normally Chemtech Duplicator is going to activate shortly after you play Sett anyways, and then the Grand General's Counter Plan gives you a good amount of control with this Facebreaker, stunning 2 enemies and creating several coins. Duplicator works surprisingly well on Sett. Definitely check it out if you have the opportunity. Again, Banshee's Veil for that extra protection is best in most situations, but you might also want to switch it out for a Lost Chapter. If you don't have Duplicator, you could swap it out for a Archangel Staff. Definitely not as good, but should still work out rather well for you. Next up, we have Tahm Kench, and I would recommend the Berserker's Buckle plus the Troll King's Crown. Berserker's Buckle essentially giving you your star powers again, works out quite nice. And then the Troll King's Crown, letting you end the game with all of your super beefed up units. And for common relics, there's a couple different options. I've found that the Armadillo Shell for the 1 health and tough actually can be quite strong. Banshee's Veil, not bad. And Warmog's Armor also works out pretty well. If you want to go for more of a controlling and duplicating playstyle, you can go for Archangel Staff, Counterplan, and Spell Shield. The Counterplan will make a Bayou Brunch where an ally can capture another ally. And remember from Tahm Kench's star powers, when you capture an ally, you make a copy of it in hand, so you can essentially duplicate units if you want. Can be a lot of fun, not really needed to win most games, but it is a fun thing you can do with Tahm Kench and no one else. For Taliyah, you can use the Scourge's Stash plus the Corrupted Star Fragment, trying to cheat her out a bit early and then able to clear up your board by consuming some of your units to put all of those stats on Taliyah. Then Banshee's Veil to be able to protect her. Or you can go a similar approach like we did for Lux and have Taliyah be more of a support champion that you don't actually worry about playing herself, and have the 3 relics of Cardmaster's Gambit, Heart of Gold, and Z-Drive Prototype to still give you some utility while her not being on the board. I will say Cardmaster's Gambit won't activate as much with Taliyah as it will for Lux, but you still will get a couple rerolls out of it. Next up, we have Teemo, and I'd recommend using Gale Force and the Curator's Gatebreaker so that when you play Teemo, he immediately gets a Nexus Strike, planting Puff Caps on the enemy Nexus, and then he's able to attack twice, again planting more Puff Caps, or if he's leveled up, doubling all of the Puff Caps in his deck. This is going to give you a massive amount of Puff Caps very early in the game. And then for common relics, you can just throw on a Banshee's Veil just to protect Teemo, so he's able to get his strikes in and safely recalled without being taken off the board. If you don't have Gale Force, then I would either go with double Gatebreaker plus Chameleon's Necklace, or the Bounty Hunter's Renown and a Gatebreaker. This will still let you do a decent amount of damage, and this way you're getting the Chameleon's Necklace so that you don't actually care necessarily if Teemo dies. You just want to have more copies that you can immediately play and have them hit the Nexus. Teemo scales very well with Nexus Strikes, because once he's leveled up, he'll double the Puff Caps in their deck, which is why Gatebreaker is so important for Teemo. Next up, we have Thresh, and I'd go for the Corrupted Star Fragment plus the Succubus Brand. So support, kill my supported ally to grant me its keywords and stats. Thresh's deck scales off having your own units die, so this works out quite well for that. And then Succubus Brand, 1/1, when I kill a unit, summon a random husk, and that husk will then die itself when you play another unit. So again, just feeding into having your own units die. These pair quite well together, being able to help stack up your board and level up your Thresh. And the Banshee's Veil just to protect Thresh with all those stats so he can level up and draw out another champion. You could also go for a level up combo with Crownguard Inheritance and Tempest Blade. When Thresh levels up, the next time he attacks, he summons a attacking champion from your deck or hand. So with this combination, once he levels up, you immediately attack to a open board since the enemy board will all be stunned. Then Thresh whatever units you have, plus the attacking champion as well. This can be very nice if you want more of a support Thresh playstyle. With this, you probably want to try to get a very powerful, expensive support champion like Aurelion Sol. You can try to cheat out early, and again, pairing it with a Banshee's Veil works out quite well. Next up, we have Varus. So for your first relic combination, you can go for Archangel Staff plus Hymn of Valor. So when you play Varus, he summons a redoubled Valor. So right here, fully heal an ally, then double its power and health. With Varus, all of your spells targeting allies are duplicated, at least if you're at your 3 stars. If you're at your 1 star, I believe it's just 1 spell every round. But you're able to have this go off twice, giving Varus an absolutely massive amount of stats. You can pair that with Archangel Staff just to make sure you have the mana to play it and your other spells. And then for your first common relic, you can have Lost Chapter so that you immediately have the mana to play the Hymn of Valor if you want, or you go for the Banshee's Veil to just wait and play Hymn of Valor the next turn, but you have that safety in the Banshee's Veil to make sure Varus isn't going to get taken off the board. If you want to go for a bit of a slower game plan but have absolutely ridiculous amounts of duplication, you could switch out for a Chemtech Duplicator and then the Banshee's Veil. Since you're already able to double up your spells normally, having a Duplicator to double them up again will just give you a crazy amount of spells going off every single round and can be pretty ridiculously fun. Again, the first build is going to be more consistent for letting you win games shortly after playing Varus, but this build can be more fun as the first build, every game kind of plays out the exact same way. Next up, we have Vayne. For your first two relics, you probably want to go with Troll King's Crown and then a stat relic. So either the Bounty Hunter's Renown or the Warhammer in most situations. With Vayne, she doesn't have any sort of keywords to really help her out like Quick Attack, so she can be quite fragile, especially in some of the later matches. So having something to help her scale up is quite nice. And then Troll King's Crown giving you Overwhelm. Vayne is able to attack up to 3 times in a round, so making sure you're not getting blocked out for all those attacks will really help you end the games a lot faster. For your common slot, you can use Lost Chapter to make it so you can play your Tumble as soon as possible. Tumble right here, free attack, very strong. Or you can go for the Rage Blade. Since Vayne can attack so much, she's able to get more benefit out of Rage Blade than pretty much anyone else. If you wanted to be even more aggressive early, you could throw on a Crown Guard Inheritance and then either put in a stat relic here or Overwhelm, up to you. This will just let you attack an extra time in the early game, potentially closing out the game. Now you will have to be very mindful of when Vayne is going to level up to obviously get the most out of the Crown Guard Inheritance, but I know a lot of people do like this to push more pressure in the early game. Since Vayne already has so many ways to trigger free attacks and rallies, I normally don't go for the Crown Guard Inheritance myself, but I know a lot of people do like it. Still, you'd either want to go for the Lost Chapter or a Rage Blade in most situations. If you're worried about Vayne getting killed by some ridiculous spell, then you could throw on a Banshee's Veil, but that's not going to be needed in most situations. Next, we have Veigar, and I would go for Scourge's Stash plus the Chemtech Duplicator. Scourge's Stash to try to cheat him out early so that he can start scaling up all of your darkness. And then the Chemtech Duplicator to just let you finish off the game. Once you hit 25, I would definitely throw on a Spell Shield. Veigar is your win condition, so being sure to protect him is very important. If you don't have the Scourge's Stash or the Chemtech Duplicator, if you're missing one of these, I would throw on a Luden's Tempest to replace whichever one you don't have. Up next, we have Vi, and I would go for the Gatebreaker plus the Bounty Hunter's Renown. You're going to try to get Vi in your opening hand, stack her up by playing cards, and then play her at 5 mana, letting her hit the enemy nexus for a large amount of damage. If it doesn't kill it, Vi should be leveled up, and she can then attack and work on finishing them off. For your common relic, using Lost Chapter is not a bad idea, as you do have a decent amount of spells. Or you could also use Soul Spear just to try to push a little bit of extra damage. Or even Chameleon's Necklace to try to make sure you have Vi in your opening hand. Or even the Troll King's Crown to make sure you have Overwhelm, so you can still challenge an enemy unit but still punch through them to hit the Nexus. Or you could go for a Wriggle's Lantern setup. Vi is somewhat the perfect champion for it, as you want her to be sitting in your hand from the start of the game. Wriggle's Lantern giving you impact twice while they're in your hand every single round. So while you're powering up Vi with all of your cards and waiting to play her, she's also charging up with a massive amount of impact. This also stacks quite well with your star powers. Up next, we have Yasuo, and for your first combination, I would go for Tempest Blade plus Crown Guard Inheritance, so that when Yasuo levels up, he clears the board by stunning and striking all of them. You then also rally and finish off the game. For your common relic, either use the Everfrost to stun the strongest enemy so you can try to level them up immediately, or go for the Banshee's Veil to give him that spell shield and a little bit of extra protection. Finally, we have Yuumi, the final champion, and she's an interesting one with her attach mechanic, as most relics don't work on her, since the only thing that she carries over when she's attached is keywords and stats, which is why we're going for Gale Force and the Bounty Hunter's Renown, so that whatever unit she's attached to will get Scout plus all of the stats from Bounty Hunters. If you're using Yuumi in a monthly challenge, then you probably want to switch this out for a different stat relic. For the common relic, I would use the Troll King's Crusher to give your unit Overwhelm. If you don't have Gale Force, you probably just want to go for 2 stat relics, as pretty much none of the other relics work other than stats and keywords. So either go for 2 stat relics or 1 stat relic and whatever keywords you want to go from the common ones. Normally go for the Troll King's Crusher because it helps you end games faster. And then with Gale Force, since you can attack twice with that Scout, Yuumi's normally going to be leveling up fairly quickly, and when she levels up, she gives the unit Spell Shield. If you don't have that Scout and your unit is dying too often, you might want to grab Spell Shield instead of the Overwhelm. Alright, that was it for the late game relic combinations. These videos always take a very long time to film and edit, so if this helped you at all, definitely like and subscribe. Really appreciate it, and I hope you all have a great day.